Have you ever noticed something strange about retirement conversations? They almost always start with the wrong question. People ask, how much money do I need? As if one giant number can settle the whole thing. It sounds wise, it sounds responsible, but it quietly sends millions of people in the wrong direction before they even realize it. Because when you keep hearing that a successful retirement means having $500,000 or $1 million or more, your brain starts treating that number like a finish line. You look at your balance, you compare, your stomach drops. And even if your bills are manageable, even if your house is paid off, even if a pension or Social Security is coming, you still feel behind. Now listen, that feeling is real. I am not brushing it off. Money worries can sit on your shoulders like an invisible weight. You get used to carrying it, but it never fully leaves. It follows you into the grocery store, into the doctor's office, and even into quiet moments at home when you're supposed to be resting. So today I want to slow this down and ask a better question. Not how many retirees have $500,000. Not how many have $1 million. The real question isn't who hits a flashy number. It's who can actually support their life month after month without fear running the show. That shift matters more than most people realize. Because the number of retirees with $500,000 or more may sound important on the surface, but by itself, it does not tell you who is sleeping well at night. It does not tell you who can handle rising bills. And it definitely does not tell you who feels steady when the market has a bad year. Before we continue, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, this would be a really good time to do it. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price, bold, official, intimidating. It looks final, but nobody with any sense stops there. They look at the trade-in, the payment, the interest rate, the insurance, the gas, the repairs, and what kind of life the car actually fits. Retirement works the same way. $500,000 is the sticker price number of retirement talk. It looks clean in a headline. It sounds authoritative. It makes for a sharp thumbnail and a strong opinion. But it ignores your paid-off home, your taxes, your spending habits, your health, your spouse, your pension, your Social Security timing, and the quiet fact that different people are trying to fund very different lives. So when I think about how many U.S. retirees actually possess $500,000 or more, I do care. I do. But I care in the right order. First, I want to know what that number means in real life. Second, I want to know how many people think they are failing simply because they are measuring themselves against the wrong scoreboard. Let me tell you about Karen and Linda. Karen is 67. She spent 35 years working as a school nurse. She lives in a small paid-off home outside Des Moines. Her retirement savings are about $230,000. If you only looked at that balance, you might assume she lies awake every night, but she doesn't. Karen knows her life. She gets Social Security. She also has a modest pension from the school system. Her property taxes are manageable. Her car is older, but reliable. She cooks at home often. She enjoys quiet mornings, church on Sundays, and visits with her grandkids. Her savings are not huge, but most of her core life is already covered before she touches them. Linda is 65. She worked as a regional operations manager for a healthcare company. She was organized, disciplined, and an excellent saver. She has around $740,000 across her retirement accounts. From the outside, Linda looks like the winner. She lives in a beautiful downtown apartment. But there is something her balance does not show. Her housing costs are high. Her condo fees keep rising. She still carries a mortgage. She wants to help an adult child now and then. She worries about health care later. She checks the market before breakfast. She delays trips she could easily afford because she is never fully sure what the next 10 years will do to her account. Here's the thing. If you only compare the balances, Linda looks safer and Karen looks exposed. If you compare their actual lives, the picture changes fast. Karen has less saved and more certainty. Linda has more saved and less certainty. It's not about who has more saved, it's about who has more certainty. I want you to imagine your retirement in two parts. Not one big number, two distinct piles. Pile 1 is income that shows up no matter what. Social Security, a pension, maybe an annuity for some people. Pile 2 is your savings. Your IRA, your 401k, your brokerage account, your cash. Both matter, but they do not play the same role. Pile 2 gets all the attention because it is visible. It has statements. It moves up and down. It gives you that little jolt when it rises and that sinking feeling when it falls. But Pile 1 often does the heavier lifting emotionally, because when money comes in every month, no matter what the market is doing, your nervous system calms down in a way a fluctuating balance rarely can. This is why so many retirement conversations quietly miss the point. They train you to stare at Pile 2 while barely noticing Pile 1. They make a pension feel ordinary because it doesn't show up as a giant account balance. They make Social Security feel small because it is familiar, but familiar does not mean weak. Quiet income can be the strongest part of the whole plan. Real data can tell one story, while perceived data tells another. Perceived data is the headline that says you need a huge number or you're in trouble. Real data is the monthly cash flow in your own household. Real data is what your bills actually cost. Real data is whether your necessary spending is mostly covered before your savings even enter the picture. Here's something I get asked all the time. Is it better to save more or guarantee more income? What do you think? Now let's talk about the number itself. When people hear $500,000, they imagine a dividing line. They think anyone below it must be struggling, and anyone above it must be comfortable. But retirement is not a pass-fail exam. It is more like building a stool with several legs. One leg might be Social Security, another might be a pension, another is savings, another could be lower housing costs or part-time work. The stronger and more balanced those legs are, the steadier the stool. But if almost all your weight sits on one leg, even a thick leg, wobble becomes more likely. That is why a person with a smaller account and stronger guaranteed income can quietly be more secure than someone with a larger account carrying the full load alone. This also helps you understand why statistics can be both useful and misleading. If we learn that only a minority of retirees have $500,000 or more, that may sound alarming, but it only becomes truly alarming if you assume savings are the whole plan. If you remember that millions of retirees also rely on Social Security, pensions, paid-off homes, and modest lifestyles, the picture becomes more layered. And if we learn that some retirees do have more than $500,000, that doesn't automatically mean they are relaxed. A big balance can still feel fragile if it has to do too much. If it has to cover basic living costs, absorb inflation, survive bad market years, and protect a surviving spouse, it can still produce a lot of fear. Think of your benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe, one you've been filling your entire working life. Every paycheck, every tax contribution, all of it builds pressure in that pipe. When you turn the faucet on at 62, you start getting water sooner, but the monthly flow is smaller. If you wait until full retirement age, the flow gets stronger. If you wait until 70, stronger still. But the question isn't what's the best age, it's what's the best decision for your life right now. That is such an important shift, because too many people turn Social Security claiming into a math contest. They are terrified of losing. They ask what the perfect age is as if the answer lives in a chart, separate from their health, their job, their spouse, and their stress level. For one person, claiming early may bring needed breathing room. For another, waiting may create a stronger income floor for later life. For a married couple, the decision may be shaped by who earned more, who is older, or who is likely to live longer. The point is not to impress anyone with a delay strategy. The point is to build the right support for your household. And if you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water never reaches you. It just stays in the pipe, unused, gone. No refunds, no replay. That truth makes some people uncomfortable, but it matters. Retirement planning is not just about maximizing on paper. It is about making useful decisions while you are alive to benefit from them. Now listen, this is where a lot of viewers start to breathe a little easier. Because once you accept that $500,000 is not a magic barrier between safety and disaster, you stop treating yourself like a failure for not hitting it. You start looking at the structure of your life instead, and structure is where peace usually begins. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Most people can tell you the size of their retirement account faster than they can tell you the size of their monthly gap. That gap is the distance between what life costs and what reliable income covers. If your basic bills are $3,800 a month and your Social Security plus pension covers $3,400, your gap is $400. That is a very different problem from saying, I only have $300,000 saved, therefore I must be doomed. Let that sink in. A lot of retirement anxiety is not caused by bad math. It is caused by blurry math. When the numbers stay fuzzy, fear fills in the blanks. And fear is very creative. It rounds every expense up. It pushes every income estimate down. It turns every future problem into a disaster before it even happens. Clarity does the opposite. Clarity shrinks vague fear down to a real size. Maybe your gap is larger than you hoped. Fine. At least now you know what you're solving. Maybe your gap is smaller than you imagined. Good. That means you can stop carrying panic that doesn't belong to you. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You need clarity. This is also where many people quietly underestimate expenses. Not the fun ones, not the dream vacation, the boring ones, the new roof, the property tax increase, the car repair you didn't expect, the dental work insurance barely touches, the hearing aids, the appliance that dies on a random Tuesday. Those ordinary costs do real damage when they are not planned for. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It doesn't melt all at once. it creeps, it nudges, it silently raises the cost of groceries, utilities, insurance, healthcare, and repairs. If you build your retirement plan using today's prices and then assume tomorrow will be close enough, you are giving inflation more power than it deserves. This is one reason cost of living adjustments matter more than many people realize. Nobody throws a party because a benefit gets a little bigger. But those quiet increases help your income keep up, at least partly, with a world that keeps getting more expensive. That does not mean Social Security solves everything. It means the benefit has more long-term value than a simple monthly number might suggest. And this brings us back to the big 500,000 question. When you hear a statistic about how many retirees do or don't have that amount, remember what it leaves out. It leaves out COLA, it leaves out fixed costs, it leaves out pensions, it leaves out whether the home is paid off, it leaves out whether one spouse is in poor health, it leaves out whether the person is living simply or stretching to maintain a lifestyle that looked good before retirement. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? That may sound dark, but it is one of the kindest conversations you can have. Survivor planning matters. A retirement plan is not just about two people growing old together. It also has to work if one person dies first. What happens to Social Security? What happens to the pension? Does one check disappear? Does the survivor get the larger benefit? Do housing costs really fall that much? Too many couples quietly assume the answer is yes. Everything will somehow work out. Then life changes, and the surviving spouse learns the income picture is not what they imagined. A pension may shrink. One Social Security check may go away. Healthcare costs may rise. The house still needs maintenance. Grief is hard enough. Financial confusion on top of it is even harder. For some couples, this is exactly why delaying the higher earner's Social Security benefit can make sense. Not because it wins an abstract math contest, but because it protects the survivor later. Again, there is no universal answer. But there is a better question. The real question isn't how do we maximize a formula? It's how do we support the person who may one day be left carrying the plan alone? This is where people with more than $500,000 can still feel very fragile. If a couple depends heavily on that savings balance and one spouse dies, the emotional weight on the remaining spouse can grow fast. They may have money, yes, but they may not have the kind of income floor that makes decisions feel manageable. Big balances and strong peace are not always the same thing. Think of Social Security not as an endpoint, but as a safety net, one you paid into your whole life, one designed to catch you when you need it most. A safety net does not make you invincible, but it does keep a bad fall from becoming a disaster. That is why many retirees with modest savings still have more stability than outsiders expect. And while we're here, let's talk about sequence of returns risk in plain English. It sounds technical, but it isn't. Imagine trying to fill your bathtub while someone is quietly pulling the drain open every few minutes. If the water pressure is weak at the wrong time, the tub never fills the way you expected. In retirement, that weak pressure can be a bad market early on, while you are also taking withdrawals. A person can retire with $600,000 and do fine if the early market years are strong. Another person can retire with the same $600,000 and struggle if the early years are bad. Same savings, different timing, different outcome. That is sequence risk. The danger is not just loss. It is loss happening early while your withdrawals are still draining the account. This is why guaranteed income is so powerful. The more of your basic life is covered by money that keeps showing up, the less pressure you put on your investments to rescue you during a bad stretch. That does not make market risk disappear, but it keeps bad timing from wrecking your monthly dignity. For many people, the answer is not actually the size of their savings. It is what those savings will have to do. Will they need to cover everything? Will they hold up if inflation runs hot? Will they survive a bear market? Will they support a surviving spouse? Will they pay for long-term care? The anxiety often lives in the burden, not the balance. You may already have what people with millions are searching for: a lower cost of living, a paid-off house, predictable monthly income, modest habits, a spouse with compatible spending, fewer financial surprises, more flexibility. Those things do not look impressive in a headline, but they can create the kind of peace many larger accounts never manage to buy. Let's get even more practical. Suppose two retirees each need $4,200 a month to live comfortably. The first retiree gets $3,600 from Social Security and a pension combined. The second gets $2,200 and must pull $2,000 more from savings every month. Which one is under more pressure? The answer is obvious once you see it, but most people never get taught to frame retirement this way. The same is true for part-time work. Some retirees love the idea, others hate it. The real question isn't whether working in retirement is good or bad. It's whether it supports the life you want. For some people, a few hundred extra dollars a month reduces pressure and adds routine. For others, it delays the freedom they worked decades to reach. Context matters. Now let me go back to Karen and Linda for a second. Karen does not feel rich. She is careful. She notices prices. She plans ahead. But she does not feel hunted by her finances. Linda, despite a much larger balance, often feels as if one wrong move could quietly erode the future she worked so hard to build. Same country, same stage of life, different emotional experience. Numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers, that matters just as much. Because emotion shapes behavior, and behavior is what carries your plan forward. A person who feels steady is more likely to stay disciplined during market swings. A person who feels constantly threatened may sell low, overspend out of stress, or underspend so severely that retirement stops feeling like living. This is one reason pension income deserves more respect than it usually gets. A lot of people mention a pension as if it were a side note. It isn't. It can be the anchor of the entire plan. A pension that pays $1,500 or $2,000 a month for life is not small. If you had to buy that kind of guaranteed income on your own, you might need a very large pile of assets. But because a pension arrives quietly, many people mentally undervalue it. They focus on the account balance because it feels more visible and more impressive. Yet the pension may be doing the hardest work in the background. It lowers the pressure on savings. It makes bad market years less dangerous. It helps you sleep. That matters. And if you do not have a pension, that does not mean you are doomed. Not at all. It simply means you may need to be more deliberate about how much of your life depends on market-based savings alone. Maybe that means keeping spending a little lower. Maybe it means delaying Social Security. Maybe it means keeping more cash reserves. Maybe it means working 1 year longer. The answer depends on your life. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Specific fear can be addressed. Vague fear just expands. Specific fear says, I need another $400 a month of reliable income, or I need to trim $600 of spending, or I should wait until full retirement age instead of claiming at 62. Vague fear just says, I am behind, I am behind, I am behind. That loop helps nobody. So what do you actually do with all this? First, figure out your true monthly needs, not guesses, real numbers. Pull out the last 12 months of spending. Add housing, food, utilities, insurance, transportation, medical costs, taxes, and the ordinary repairs people always forget. Do not skip the boring stuff. The boring stuff is where retirement plans quietly succeed or fail. Second, separate needs from wants. You need food, shelter, healthcare, power, and basic transportation. You may want extra travel, frequent gifts, home upgrades, and dinners out. Both matter. This is not about becoming a monk. It is about knowing which expenses are fixed and which can bend if life gets tight for a season. Third, map your reliable income in plain English. Write down what Social Security would pay at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70. Write down your pension. Write down your spouse's benefits. Write down any part-time income you truly expect. When the income floor becomes visible, your fear usually gets smaller because the foundation stops feeling abstract. Fourth, stress test the plan. What if inflation stays stubborn for a few years? What if the market drops early? What if one spouse dies first? What if the car lasts 1 year less than you hoped? You are not doing this to scare yourself. You are doing it because a plan that only works when life behaves perfectly is not a plan. It is a wish. Fifth, give your savings a job. Some of that money is for emergencies, some is for travel, some is for healthcare surprises, some is for filling the monthly gap. When every dollar has a role, the balance stops being a vague pile of hope and starts becoming a useful tool. Your savings should serve your life, not the other way around. And yes, if you are married or partnered, do survivor planning now. Review beneficiaries. Understand what happens to the pension. Understand how Social Security changes after a death. Make sure both people know where accounts are, what bills exist, and how the household would function if one person had to carry it alone. That conversation may feel uncomfortable, but it is an act of love. By now, you can probably see why the $500,000 question is both important and incomplete. Important because it tells us something about how prepared people may be on paper. Incomplete because paper is not life. Life is monthly. Life is emotional. Life is full of rising costs, changing health, spouses, homes, habits, trade-offs, and years that do not behave the way projections said they would. So when I consider how many U.S. retirees actually possess $500,000 or more, I do not use that number to decide whether people are safe. I use it as one clue, one piece of a much larger picture, a picture that only becomes honest when you add income, expenses, inflation, survivor risk, sequence risk, and the actual shape of a person's day-to-day life. Retirement isn't about how much you've accumulated. It's about whether your income can support your life. That sentence sounds simple, maybe too simple, but simple is not the same as shallow. In fact, some of the most powerful financial truths sound almost obvious once you finally hear them the right way. Because the goal is not to win a comparison contest. The goal is not to impress your brother-in-law or some stranger online. The goal is not to die with the most money in the family. The goal is to build a life that feels stable, useful, and free enough to enjoy. The goal isn't just to survive retirement. The goal is to enjoy it. That is why I want you to be careful with the stories you tell yourself. If you keep saying, I don't have 500,000, therefore I failed, you may spend years carrying fear you never needed to carry. But if you say, let me understand my real numbers, let me strengthen my income floor, let me lower the pressure on my savings, you move from panic to planning. Think about Karen. Think about Linda. One looks weaker on paper and steadier in daily life. The other looks stronger on paper and shakier in private moments. Neither example means money does not matter. Of course it matters. It means money has to be interpreted through the life it is meant to support. So if you are sitting there right now wondering whether you are behind because you do not have $500,000, take a breath. Do not let one statistic decide your emotional future. Look deeper. Look at your bills. Look at your guaranteed income. Look at your options. Look at your spouse's situation. Look at your health. Look at your actual life. You may not be as far behind as you think, or maybe you are behind in one area but stronger in another. Both can be true. The point is accuracy. The point is honesty. The point is replacing vague fear with useful clarity so you can make smart moves while you still have time and choice on your side. Think about this. There are people with millions of dollars who don't feel secure. And there are people with modest savings who sleep soundly every night. The difference isn't the number. The difference is understanding. Understanding your income, understanding your expenses, understanding what actually matters. That's the difference between stress and peace. If this gave you a new perspective, if it made you think differently, even just a little, then subscribe. The more clarity you build now, the stronger your future becomes.